Chapter 3 A Magic Pencil. By the time I was 8 years old, my father had more than 800 students and 3 campuses, an elementary division, and 2 high schools, one for boys and one for girls. So our family finally had enough money to buy a TV. That's when I became obsessed with owning a magic pencil. I got the idea from Shakalaka Boom Boom, the show Safina and I watched after school. It was about a boy named Sanju who could make anything real by drawing it. If he was hungry, he drew a bowl of curry and it appeared. If he was in danger, he drew a policeman. He was a little hero, always protecting people who were in danger. At night, I would pray, God, please give me Sanju's pencil. I won't tell anyone. Just leave it in my cupboard. I will use it to make everyone happy. As soon as I finished praying, I would check the drawer, but the pencil was never there. One afternoon, the boys weren't home, and my mother asked me to throw away some potato peels and eggshells. I walked to the dump, just a block or so from our house, wrinkling my nose as I got close, swatting away flies and making sure I didn't step on anything in my nice shoes. If only I had Sanju's magic pencil. I would erase it all, the smell, the rats, the giant mountain of rotting food. As I tossed our rubbish onto the heap, I saw something move. I jumped. It was a girl my age. Her hair was matted and her skin was covered in sores. She was sorting rubbish into piles, one for cans, one for bottles. Nearby, boys were fishing in the pile for metal using magnets on strings. I wanted to talk to them, but I was scared. Later that day, when my father returned home, I told him about the children at the dump and dragged him to see them. He spoke gently to the children, but they ran away. I asked him why they weren't in school. He told me that these children were supporting their families, selling whatever they found for a few rupees. If they went to school, their families would go hungry. As we walked back home, I saw tears on his cheek. I believe there is something good for every evil, that every time there's a bad person, God sends a good one. So I decided that it was time to talk to God about this problem. Dear God, I wrote in a letter, did you know there are children who are forced to work on the rubbish heap? I stopped. Of course he knew. Then I realized that it was his will that I had seen them. He was showing me that what my life would be if I couldn't go to school. Until then, I had believed a magic pencil could change the world. Now I knew I would have to do something. I didn't know what it was, but I asked God for strength and courage to make the world a better place. I signed my letter, rolled it up, tied it to a piece of wood, placed a dandelion on top, and floated it into a stream that flows in the Swat River. Surely God would find it. As much as I wanted to help the children from the dump, my mother wanted to help everyone. She had started putting bread crusts in a bowl on the kitchen windowsill. Nearby was an extra pot of rice and chicken. The bread was for the birds. The food was for the poor family in our neighborhood. I asked her once why she always gave food away. We have known what it is like to be hungry, Pisho, she said. We must never forget to share what we have. So we shared everything we had. We even shared our home with the family of 7 who had fallen on hard times. They were supposed to pay my father rent, but more often than not, he ended up lending them money. And although my father's school wasn't really making a profit, he gave away more than 100 free places to poor children. He wished he could have given away more. My mother, meanwhile, started serving a few girls breakfast at our house each day. How can they learn if their stomachs are empty, she would say. One day I noticed that some of our longtime students had not returned. I asked my father where they were. Oh, Johnny, he said. Some of the richer parents took their children out of school when they found out that they were sharing classrooms with the sons and daughters of people who cleaned their houses or washed their clothes. I was young, but I was old enough to feel that wasn't right and to understand that if too many paying students left, it would mean hard times for the school and for our family. What I didn't know was that a bigger threat was looming, not just for our family and for our school, but for all of Pakistan. And we are going to stop there for chapter. We'll do one more. Chapter 4. A warning from God. One autumn day when I was still in primary school, our desks started to tremble and shake. Earthquake! We yelled. We ran outside, some of us falling as we crowded through the narrow door and gathered around our teachers for safety and comfort, like chicks around a mother hen. Simile. A few of the girls were crying. We lived in a region where earthquakes happened often, but this felt different. Even after we returned to class, the buildings continued to shake. The rumbling didn't stop. Miss Ulfat, my all-time favorite teacher, told us to stay calm. She assured us that it would soon be over, but when another strong earthquake hit within a few minutes of the first, the students were sent home. When I arrived home, I found my mother sitting in the courtyard, where she feels safest because there's no roof above her. She was reciting verses from the Holy Quran as tears streamed down her face. The aftershocks kept coming and continued past nightfall, and every time they did, my mother ran outside and insisted we go with her. My father told her to not upset the children, but we were already upset because the ground was shaking. The earthquake of October 8th, 2005 turned out to be one of the worst in history. It was a 7.6 on the Richter scale and was felt as far away as Kabul and Delhi. Aftershocks continued for at least a month. Our city of Mingora was largely spared, but the northern areas of Pakistan, including our beloved Shangla, were devastated. When we finally heard from my family and friends there, they said they had thought it was the end of the world. They described the roar of rocks sliding down hills and everyone running out of their houses reciting the Holy Quran, the screams as roofs crashed down, and the howls of buffalo and goats. They were terrified, and then when the destruction stopped, they waited for help. The government was slow to arrive, but help came immediately from rescue workers from a conservative religious group called Tariq-e-Nifaz-e-Sharia Mohammadi, TNSM, or the Movement for the Enforcement of Islamic Law, led by Sufi Muhammad and his son-in-law Maulana Fazullah. Eventually, the government tried to help, and aid from the Americans, who had troops and helicopters in nearby Afghanistan, made it in. But most of the volunteers and medical help came from organizations that were linked with militant groups, like the TNSM. They helped clear and rebuild destroyed villages. They led prayers and buried bodies. They took in many of the 11,000 orphan children. In our culture, orphans are usually adopted by the extended family, but the earthquake had been so bad that entire families had been wiped out or lost everything and were in no position to care for additional children. Many of the orphans went to live in fundamentalist madrasas. Mullahs from the TNSM preached that the earthquake was a warning from God. If we did not mend our ways and introduce Sharia or Islamic law, more severe punishment would come. The whole country was in shock for a long time after the earthquake. We were vulnerable, which made it that much easier for someone with bad intentions to use a nation's fear for his gain. All right, now we'll stop at chapter 4, and we will continue there. Continue at chapter 5 tomorrow. Okay?